Picture a dark, smoke-filled boardroom in 1870 Cleveland, Ohio. The air is heavy with the scent of expensive cigars and burning coal. Sitting on one side of a massive mahogany table is a young, slender, ice-cold man named John D. Rockefeller. He is only 30 years old, dressed in a plain black suit, sitting perfectly upright, and speaking in a quiet, almost ghostly whisper. On the other side of the table sits a wall of stone-faced railroad tycoons. These are the kings of the Gilded Age. Men who control the tracks, the locomotives, and the entire physical infrastructure of the United States. To them, Rockefeller is an absolute nobody. He is just a small-time operator running a single, vulnerable oil refinery. Rockefeller has come to negotiate a fair shipping rate to move his oil. Instead of treating him as an equal, a prominent railroad boss looks him dead in the eye, chuckles, and dismisses him. They tell him his volume is pathetic. They tell him he will pay the inflated, predatory prices they set, or they will simply crush his business overnight by cutting off his trains. To the tycoons, Rockefeller is just a disposable customer, a temporary tenant living in a golden cage they own. In that humiliating moment, Rockefeller didn't blink. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show a single flash of anger. But beneath that calm exterior, something snapped. Rockefeller realized a terrifying truth that every entrepreneur eventually learns the hard way. It doesn't matter how perfect your product is, how hard you work, or how much passion you put into your business. If a ruthless middleman owns the infrastructure and controls the distribution, you are not an independent businessman, you are just a highly paid slave to the machine. Most people would have bowed down, paid the corporate tax, and went home to cut costs. But Rockefeller walked out of that boardroom, looked back at the smokestacks, and made a silent vow. He wasn't going to play their rigged game anymore. He was going to turn their own supply chain bottleneck into the most lethal corporate weapon in human history. In just 90 days, he would use it to systematically force 22 of his 26 competitors to completely surrender their businesses to him, pulling off the ultimate corporate heist. To understand the terrifying calculation that Rockefeller brought to this war, you have to understand the psychological scars that shaped his mind. John D. Rockefeller did not grow up in a happy, stable home. He was raised in deep poverty, under the shadow of a deeply traumatic childhood. His father, William "Devil Bill" Rockefeller, was a literal con man. He was a traveling snake oil salesman who claimed to sell cancer cures from a horse-drawn wagon. Devil Bill would abandon his family for months at a time, leaving John's deeply religious mother to struggle just to put bread on the table. But when Devil Bill did return home, he didn't bring love, he brought psychological warfare. He was an absolute sadist to his own children. He famously bragged about his twisted parenting style, openly telling friends, "I cheat my boys every chance I get. I want to make him sharp." Think about that. As a young boy, John grew up in an environment where the person who was supposed to protect him from the world was actively trying to exploit and trick him. He was taught from the crib that trust was a fatal flaw, that the world was a predatory jungle, and that betrayal was always just around the corner. This emotional cruelty left John with a permanent, suffocating need for total control. He became obsessed with order, details, and self-discipline. He lived in constant fear of being vulnerable or at the mercy of anyone else's power. Money wasn't just wealth to young Rockefeller, it was a psychological fortress against a chaotic, untrustworthy world. He was a ticking time bomb of cold ambition, waiting for the right industry to conquer. And then, in the 1860s, humanity struck black gold. Suddenly, the hills of Pennsylvania were erupting with oil. It was the Wild West. Thousands of frantic wildcatters were drilling into the earth, desperate to strike it rich. Overnight, oil became the lifeblood of the global economy, used to light up every home, factory, and street lamp in America. But while everyone else was losing their minds drilling for oil in the mud, Rockefeller stood back and analyzed the chaos with the cold precision of a chess grandmaster. He realized that drilling for oil was a fool's errand. It was highly unpredictable, chaotic, and dangerous. You could drill a hole and get rich, or drill 10 holes and go completely broke. So Rockefeller focused on the one bottleneck everyone else ignored: refining. He didn't want to pull the oil out of the ground. He wanted to process it, clear the impurities, and turn it into standard kerosene. By 1870, he had built a highly efficient refinery. But as he tried to scale his empire, he ran directly into the brick wall of the railroad monopolies. Men like Cornelius Vanderbilt and Tom Scott didn't care about the art of refining, they cared about extraction. They realized that because they owned the tracks connecting the oil fields to the major cities, they held the keys to the kingdom. If they decided to double the shipping rates tomorrow, an oil refiner either paid the tax or went bankrupt. Rockefeller's competitors accepted this as an unchangeable reality. They frantically scrambled to cut costs inside their factories, completely blind to the fact that the real war wasn't happening on the factory floor. It was happening on the tracks. Rockefeller refused to play defense. He studied the railroad's business model and found their single greatest hidden vulnerability: empty cargo space. Running a massive steam locomotive with empty cars cost the tycoons an absolute fortune. They needed consistency to stay profitable. Rockefeller realized that if he could guarantee a massive, predictable volume of oil every single day, he could flip the leverage on the very men who had mocked him. In early 1872, Rockefeller quietly met with a rival rail line in absolute, ironclad secrecy. He made them an audacious offer that sounded too good to be true. He promised to fill 60 carloads of oil every single day, keeping their trains running at maximum capacity and perfect efficiency. In exchange, he demanded a standard rebate, a massive, under-the-table discount on his own shipping costs. But that was just standard business. What Rockefeller introduced next was a cutthroat, highly controversial loophole that Wall Street had never seen before: the drawback. The setup was downright evil. Rockefeller forced the railroad to agree that for every single barrel of oil his competitors shipped on their tracks, the railroad had to secretly pay a percentage of that fee directly to Rockefeller. Let that sink in. Rockefeller's competitors were paying the standard, inflated shipping rates to transport their product. They were working day and night, sweating in the factories trying to survive. But every single time they shipped a barrel of oil to a customer, a portion of their hard-earned money was legally funneled straight into the bank account of their biggest rival, John D. Rockefeller. He had successfully weaponized his competitor's supply chain into his own private funding machine. The more oil his rivals shipped to stay alive, the richer Rockefeller became. He was literally using his competitors' own money to fund the army that was about to destroy them. It was a closed economic loop of absolute devastation. With the drawback weapon fully loaded and hidden in the shadows, February 1872 marked the beginning of what historians call the Cleveland Massacre. Rockefeller didn't launch a loud, public marketing campaign. He didn't lower his prices to the consumer or pick fights in the press. Instead, he went to his competitors one by one. He would walk into their offices, sit down with that eerie, unblinking coolness, and place his financial ledger directly on the table. He didn't threaten them with violence or anger. He just showed them the math. He explained, with absolute clarity, that because of his secret shipping arrangements, he could transport oil at a price they could never hope to match. Furthermore, he calmly pointed out that their own shipments were actively paying his bills. He gave them a brutal, binary choice: sell your refinery to me now for a fair price in Standard Oil stock, or keep fighting a game that is mathematically impossible for you to win. The realization hit his competitors like a freight train. They weren't just fighting a rival company, they were fighting a ghost in the machine. They looked at Rockefeller's ledger and realized that every day they stayed in business, they were just digging their own graves faster. The psychological pressure was unbearable. One by one, the proud independent oil men of Cleveland broke down. In a staggering, relentless 90-day blitz, 22 out of 26 oil refiners surrendered. They handed over their keys, signed away their life's work, and merged entirely into Standard Oil. The boy who had been trained by a conman father to expect betrayal had just pulled off the ultimate corporate heist, achieving total regional dominance without firing a single shot. But right here is where the story takes a massive, unexpected twist. Rockefeller believed he had built an unshakable empire. He thought he had outsmarted the system forever. But he forgot one critical rule of the Gilded Age: the titans you beat will stop at nothing to destroy you. The railroad tycoons finally woke up and realized they had been played. They discovered that Rockefeller's secret drawback loophole was slowly draining their own power and bleeding them dry. Furious at being manipulated by a 30-year-old upstart, the king of the tracks, Cornelius Vanderbilt himself, joined forces with his fiercest rivals to form an all-powerful anti-Rockefeller alliance. Overnight, they struck back with a devastating counterattack. The major railroads completely canceled all of Rockefeller's secret discounts, tore up the drawback contracts, and doubled the shipping rates exclusively for Standard Oil. Suddenly, the trap snapped shut on Rockefeller. His brilliant supply chain weapon was completely gone. His factories were overflowing with oil he couldn't move, and his company was losing thousands of dollars a day. The media began celebrating the impending collapse of Standard Oil. Wall Street thought Rockefeller was finished. But they completely underestimated the depth of his psychological obsession with control. Rockefeller didn't panic. Instead of begging the railroads for mercy, he decided to do something so radical, so profoundly insane, that it shocked the entire industrial world. He looked at the thousands of miles of railroad tracks and said, "Fine. If you won't let me use your tracks, I will render your entire industry obsolete." Rockefeller took every single dollar Standard Oil had left, risked total bankruptcy, and began secretly buying up narrow strips of land stretching across mountains, rivers, and states. He wasn't laying down tracks. He was laying down heavy iron pipes. Rockefeller invented the world's first long-distance, high-pressure oil pipeline system. It was a logistical miracle. Suddenly, Rockefeller could pump millions of gallons of oil directly from the oil fields straight to the coastal cities, completely bypassing the railroads altogether. He didn't need their trains, their cargo cars, or their boardrooms anymore. The twist was an absolute death blow to the transportation industry. The railroads, the very monopolies that had tried to crush Rockefeller, suddenly found their cargo cars completely empty. Oil shipments plummeted by over 90%. Railroad stocks crashed, companies went bankrupt, and the arrogant tycoons who had laughed at Rockefeller in 1870 were forced to beg him for business just to keep their workers paid. Rockefeller hadn't just survived the trap. He had completely conquered the infrastructure of America. John D. Rockefeller turned a humiliating boardroom insult and a lifetime of childhood trauma into the largest monopoly in human history, eventually controlling 90% of all the oil in America. He became the world's first billionaire not by having the best product, but by owning the pipes that delivered it. The brutal conquest of Standard Oil leaves behind three profound lessons for the modern era. First, weaponize the bottleneck. True power doesn't lie in the creation of the product. It lies in controlling the single point of failure in your industry. If you control the gate, you control the castle. Second, create asymmetric leverage. Rockefeller didn't just ask for a discount. He created a system where his rivals' everyday activities actively funded his growth. Always look for strategic partnerships where your competitors' expenses naturally transform into your revenue. Third, the math wins the war. Rockefeller never let emotion, pride, or ego dictate his business choices. He used the cold, unassailable logic of numbers to convince his rivals that surrender was their only logical option. Today, a century later, the oil fields of Pennsylvania are gone, but the digital landscape is filled with brand new rail lines. App stores, advertising networks, payment gateways, and algorithm feeds are the modern logistics bottlenecks. Every single day, millions of digital entrepreneurs, creators, and business owners willingly pay a heavy corporate tax just to get their product in front of an audience. Which leaves one chilling question to ponder. Are you building a business that is completely at the mercy of the modern algorithm monopolies? Or are you quietly figuring out how to build your own tracks?